During the depths of a dream, I'm with a group of friends hanging out in a jazz bar. It's a low-key, small room with many friendly, relaxed people enjoying music from an improv band. I go to the bar and buy some deliciously sliced Wagyu beef, served on a paper plate with a toothpick to eat the meat. We all leave the jazz bar, and I follow behind while enjoying the food. The dream is nothing out of the ordinary, but what happens next is one of the most dramatic shifts from a lower dimension to a higher dimension that I've ever had. As I'm walking on the city streets, I lose sight of my friends, and I look for them down dark alleys. The roads seem to become eerier and desolate. The feeling of fear jolted me into lucidity. This often happens when I feel fear in dreams, like my subconscious suddenly switches into high alert and swiftly turns on my waking consciousness to defend itself. Immediately upon realizing it's a dream, I become hyper-aware. Not wanting to be in this dream anymore, I intend to stop the dream and enter the astral. However, instead of expecting the dream to collapse and enter a normal Earth-like realm in the astral, I involuntarily enter into the lower regions of the astral world. Instead of being in dark city streets of black and gray like my dream was, I was now in a crumbling post-apocalyptic city of smoky black and red. There was a prominent presence of hostility and insidiousness. I walked down a street, not impressed at all by what I was seeing. Every block of cement had some sort of damage, and the sky was pitch black with streamy, dark gray clouds across its expanse. As I walked around a corner, I saw a big open courtyard with diseased-looking people everywhere walking slowly and creepily, clearly with no clue as to where they were going. I thought to myself that I always thought typical Hollywood films of zombies were just an exaggerated reflection of the lower worlds, yet here I was watching something that could easily be on the set of The Walking Dead. To my surprise, I didn't feel much fear. I've met negative, lower beings before who have been more terrifying, and these zombies appeared so feeble-minded that they didn't seem like much of a threat. I even considered if I could help these people who were unquestionably lost souls. I watched them for a few moments, looking for any sign of intelligence, when one noticed me. His face, arms, hands, and legs had blood, rashes, and scars all over them, and his skin had a tint of gray as if he was ill to the bone. His clothes were ragged, dirty, and shredded. As I looked into his eyes, I saw barely any glimpse of life, perhaps deep inside. I saw fear, but there was a strong feeling of anger and malice on the surface. He looked at me for a few moments, and I considered whether I would be able to talk to him. He took a few steps towards me and then suddenly began running at me with a treacherous growl. As he got within an inch of me, without any thought, I cast a force of light at him, which threw him backwards and into the air. I'd never done this before. It was instinctive. I watched him fall and get back up. Realizing that there wasn't much I could do here, I intended to leave this place, and I felt myself traveling downwards, underground. I began to hear a demonic voice and realized I was going in the wrong direction. With pure willpower, I forcefully flew upwards and chanted the mantra, Om. And I flew back up through the surface, leaving the crowd of diseased humans beneath me. The fear of going even lower than that dimension and hearing that evil voice frightened me, and in turn must have given me such a powerful surge of energy because the next part blew my mind. As I chanted, Om, and flew upwards, ascending through the dimensions, I didn't just stop and arrive somewhere normal as I usually do. Instead, I accelerated. and I felt myself enter through what I can only describe as penetrating a celestial atmosphere. If the Earth's atmosphere is the Earth's head, I felt my head and mind expand as if my consciousness was merging into space. I felt myself lose my usual form and become only awareness. I enjoyed this expanding feeling so much that I willed myself to go faster, and I soon seemed to be traveling through a wormhole. I intended to go far into space and beyond the stars as I possibly could. I began to see stars, planets, meteors, and space clouds go past me. I knew that in a sense I was flying past them at an extremely fast speed, but in another sense it also felt like the objects were going past me, rather than me just traveling past them. Wormhole travel must genuinely be to do with bending the laws of space, time, and distance to get somewhere faster instead of just traveling in the physical sense of A to B. As if by magic, I eventually found myself inside the room of a tall building, filled with bright light. I looked at my hands. I was back in my usual form. The room I was in gave the impression of a hotel. It was immaculate, and all the furniture was pure white. I was standing in front of a tall and wide floor-length window, looking out at the most majestic vastness of crystal-clear ocean I'd ever seen. There was pure golden light on the sky's horizon, and the atmosphere dispersed upwards to the top of the sky into a glowing neon blue gradient. There was an island in the middle of the ocean with a colorful tropical-like vegetation that was not familiar to me. What caught my attention next was looking below the sea. There were giant sea creatures the size of whales swimming in groups. They looked like a mixture between a whale, goldfish, and koi at the same time. There were people on the water, or humanoids for a better word. Not exactly human, but they had the same structure as humans, except they looked larger, more flexible, less hairy, and they were clearly good swimmers. I considered whether this was some form of oceanic humanoid species on a planet unknown to humanity. I've had no prior knowledge about such a species, nor any interest in such things, yet here I was. Why did my consciousness bring me here? I was trying to discern them, but the problem was I was so high up in the building, so I couldn't distinguish them clearly. I felt that I was so far from Earth that I was the one who felt like an alien, and I felt like I had to conceal myself. I felt reluctant to get closer in fear of drawing attention to myself. On the other hand, these people looked incredibly joyous and friendly. Some of them were riding on boat-like vehicles. Most of them were swimming or standing on platforms. Even though I could barely see them, I could see they were enjoying themselves profusely, jumping in and out of the sea, riding in boats with their arms in the air and swimming with the sea creatures. I could hear their cheering and laughter. I couldn't help but smile in awe of them. They enjoyed swimming with the animals, and they unquestionably had a close bond with them. The joy they were radiating was immense and infectious. I felt so ecstatic that I wanted to fly and join them. I watched the giant fish swimming under the water and jumping into the air and playing with the people. They were all carefree and happy. It was a stark contrast to where I had just been. The fact that I was in a hotel-like building with people having all sorts of water-based fun made me feel like I was on a planet where happiness and leisure were a usual way of life. It felt remarkably light compared to our dense world on Earth. I looked around my bare white room. I saw a screen on a wall which had my location on a map. I didn't recognize the landscape. Most of it was water, which made me consider it was probably mostly a water-based planet. The feeling of being on another planet became even stronger when I saw their moon in the sky. It was no regular moon. It was bigger and shining powerfully, as bright as a star. It looked as if it had solar rays beaming from its sides. I was baffled, and as I stared into the moon, trying to figure out how it was so bright, I started to feel off balance. At this point, there was someone in the room with me. I heard a female voice tell me about the place. I couldn't make out her appearance. I told the woman I had to go as I felt myself losing energy. Even though I couldn't see her, I could feel her smiling at me. I felt love. I let myself go. My awareness gracefully glided back into my body, and I felt my physical presence again. I didn't move or open my eyes, and recollected the entire experience, all the way from where I was in the dream in the jazz bar. While recalling, I had a deep sense that I had been to that planet before. I knew the woman in the room with me. Perhaps I had a past life there. I'm not sure. Maybe that's the reason I went there out of anywhere else. After feeling a jolt of fear in the lower regions of the astral, perhaps a deeper part of me wanted to go somewhere familiar, somewhere happy. One thing that confused me most was the moon shining like a star. It made me consider whether I was in the third-dimensional world or not. I'm not sure whether it's scientifically possible for a moon to shine so bright. Maybe their star was very close, and the moon reflected more powerfully than usual. Or perhaps I was in a much higher dimensional plane than I thought, where such things are possible. It also reminded me about occult texts that I've read that point towards both moons and water being representations of emotion. On top of that, the species I saw were highly and positively emotional spirits. The end.